Ambassador Elena Vasquez had served humanity among the stars for 23 years. She had learned to smile when aliens looked at her like she was a trained animal. She had learned to bow when protocol demanded it. She had learned to swallow her pride because Earth needed friends in a galaxy that did not want them, but nothing had prepared her for this. The message arrived at 3:00 in the morning station time, a summon to the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Concord. Not a request, not an invitation, a summon. The word itself was an insult. In 40 years of membership, humanity had never been summoned. Elena dressed in her formal uniform and took the transport pod to Axiom Prime, the great neutral station that floated between empires. The structure was massive, a spinning wheel of metal and light that held representatives from 17 species. Humanity had worked for decades just to earn a seat in its halls. She walked through corridors filled with aliens who would not meet her eyes. The Valkyrie, tall and silver-skinned, turned away as she passed. The insect-like chorus servants stopped their cleaning to stare. A group of Dominion officers laughed at something one of them whispered. Elena kept walking. She had learned long ago that showing pain only encouraged them. The Grand Chamber was a vast amphitheater carved from asteroid stone. 17 delegations sat in elevated boxes that circled the room like a crown. In the center, far below them, all was a single circle of light, the accused circle. Elena stopped at the entrance. Her aide, a young man named David Chun, made a small sound of shock. "Ambassador," he said quietly, "that position is for—" "I know what it is." For Elena said. She walked down the long stairs alone. Every step echoed in the silence. She felt hundreds of alien eyes watching her descend. When she reached the circle, she stood in its center and lifted her chin. "I arbiter." Telvan of the Sovereignty rose from his seat. He was ancient. His scales faded to pale gray, but his voice filled the chamber like thunder. "The Galactic Concord recognizes the presence of the human delegation," he said. "You stand accused." Elena's translator chip fed his words directly into her mind. She kept her face calm even as her heart began to pound. "Accused of what?" "At High Arbiter," Telvan smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Where to begin?" He lifted a tablet and began to read. "Aggressive expansion into the Kepler, Proxima, and Vega systems, which were designated as buffer zones. Refusal to comply with population management protocols. Development of faster-than-light technology that violates the Concord's technological balance standards, and, most seriously, the construction of orbital defense platforms around your home world despite explicit prohibition." Elena stepped forward. "High Arbiter, if I may respond." Her microphone cut off. The light in her circle dimmed slightly. Someone in the Velry box laughed. Telvan continued as if she had not spoken. "These violations represent a pattern of defiance that the Concord can no longer ignore." Humanity was welcomed into this assembly as newcomers, as children learning to walk among their betters. "You were given every opportunity to prove yourselves worthy of trust." He paused and looked directly at her. "You have failed." The Velry ambassador rose. Next, his name was Kethon, and Elena knew him well. He had blocked human trade agreements for 15 years. He had called humanity an infestation in private meetings that were not as private as he thought. "Let us speak plainly," Catherine said. humans are clever vermin who learn to mimic civilization. They copy our technology. They breed without restraint. They spread across the stars like a disease. And now they dare to build weapons. He laughed and others joined him. Perhaps we should be grateful. It gives us a reason to do what we should have done 40 years ago. Alina tried to speak again. Her microphone was dead. The Dominion representative, a massive creature named Gronik, leaned forward in his seat. I propose a simple solution. Reduce the human home world to protected wildlife reserve. Allow them to keep one continent, sterilize the rest. In a few generations, their numbers will be manageable. More laughter. Alina felt her hands shaking, not from fear, from rage. She had spent her entire career building bridges. She had truly believed that patience and diplomacy could earn humanity a place in the galaxy. She had defended the conquered. To her own people, she had told angry generals and bitter colonists that the aliens would accept them eventually, that they just needed more time. She had been a fool. The session continued for 2 more hours. One by one, representatives rose to speak. Some called humans dangerous, others called them pathetic. A few suggested they were both. No one defended them. No one even suggested that humanity should be allowed to speak. Finally, Telvan raised his hand for silence. The conquered has reached the decision, he announced. Effective immediately, humanity's membership in this assembly is suspended. All human colonies outside the Sol system will be redistributed among conquered members for proper management. A joint fleet will arrive in your home system within 6 standard days to oversee compliance. Restructuring. He looked down at Alina with something like pity. You may go now, Ambassador. Your services are no longer required. 2 guards approached to escort her out. Alina walked between them with her back straight and her eyes forward. She did not look at the delegations. She did not acknowledge the scattered applause that followed her. David Chun was waiting at the exit. His face was pale. Ambassador, what do we do? Alina kept walking. She did not answer until they were in the transport pod, speeding away from Axiom Prime toward the human diplomatic cruiser waiting in the distance. We go home, she said, and then Alina thought about 40 years of humiliation. She thought about the colonists forced from their homes. She thought about the scientists imprisoned for crimes that only existed because the conquered feared human progress. She thought about every smile she enforced, every insult she had swallowed, every time she had told her people to be patient, and then she said quietly, we show them who they were laughing at. Behind them, the lights of Axiom Prime glittered like cold stars. 17 species celebrated their victory over the upstar humans. They raised drinks and made jokes and congratulated each other on finally putting humanity in its place. None of them noticed the small human shuttle growing smaller in the darkness. None of them knew that they had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. The human diplomatic cruiser Quiet Resolve hung in the darkness between stars. It was a small ship built for speed rather than comfort. Ambassador Alina Vasquez had traveled in it for years, carrying messages of peace to species that did not want peace. Tonight it would carry a different kind of message. Captain Marcus Akono met her at the airlock. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and calm eyes that had seen too much. He saluted as she stepped aboard. Ambassador, we received word from Earth 10 minutes ago and Protocol Prometheus is active. Elena closed her eyes. For a moment she allowed herself to feel the weight of those words. Protocol Prometheus, the plan that everyone hoped would never be needed, the plan that meant humanity was done pretending. How long until we reach Earth? 14 hours at maximum speed. Make it 12. The captain nodded and turned to give orders. Elena walked to her quarters and locked the door. She sat on her bed and stared at the wall for a long time. 20 years ago she had been a young diplomat assigned to her first alien contact mission. She had been so hopeful then, so certain that humanity could find its place among the stars. Through kindness and patience, her mentor, an old man named James Worthington, had listened to her dreams and smiled sadly. Remember this moment, he had told her. Remember how much you believe in them, and when they finally show you what they truly think of us, remember that we tried. She had not understood then, she understood now. On Earth, the sun was setting over Geneva. Secretary General Amara Asai stood before the United Terran Congress in a chamber that had been sealed from all outside communication. 300 representatives from every nation sat in silence waiting. Amara was a small woman with silver hair and eyes like iron. She had led humanity for 12 years. She had smiled at alien ambassadors and signed unfair treaties, and watched her people suffer under restrictions that no other species had to endure. She had done it all because she believed there was no other choice. The conquered had just given her another choice. 6 hours ago she began. Ambassador Vasquez was summoned before the galactic conquered. She was placed in the accused circle, a position reserved for criminals and conquered peoples. She was not allowed to speak in her own defense. She was forced to listen as 17 species discussed whether humanity should be enslaved, sterilized, or simply reduced to a managed population. On a single continent, the chamber was absolutely silent. The conquered has suspended our membership. They have claimed our colonies. They are sending a fleet to our home system to enforce what they call compliance restructuring. Amara paused. In simple terms, they are coming to take everything we have built and remind us that we are nothing but clever animals who forgot our place. Murmur ran through the chamber. Amara raised her hand. But here is what they do not know. She pressed a button on her podium. The lights dimmed and the holographic display appeared above her head. It showed a map of human space, not the small limited territory the conquered believed humanity controlled, but something far larger. For 20 years, we have maintained two faces. The face we showed the galaxy was weak, compliant, eager to please. We accepted their restrictions. We apologized for our ambitions. We let them believe we were exactly what they wanted us to be. The map expanded. Hidden installations appeared in asteroid belts. Secret shipyards flickered into view in the spaces between stars. Research stations showed themselves in dimensions that conquered sensors could not detect. The other faces, this 2,400 warships, weapons technology 3 generations ahead of anything the conquered possesses, defense systems that can stop any fleet they send against us. The murmur became a roar. Representatives rose from their seats shouting questions. Amara waited until they quieted. I know what you are thinking, why did we hide this? Why did we endure 40 years of humiliation? When we had the power to fight, she stepped away from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage because we hoped we were wrong about them, because we wanted to believe that patience and diplomacy could work, because we did not want to become the monsters they accused us of being. A voice hardened, but there comes a moment when hope becomes foolishness, when patience becomes surrender, when the choice is between dignity and survival, and you realize that without dignity, survival means nothing. She returned to the podium. I will not read you the full list of what they have done to us. You know it already. You know about the Kepler evacuation, when 40,000 colonists were forced from their homes at gunpoint. You know about the Vega incident, when our research station was destroyed and 200 scientists were imprisoned for the crime of being too smart. You know about the trade restrictions that have kept our economy dependent on alien charity for decades. She pulled out a small tablet. But I will read you the names of those we lost, the ones the conquered killed and called it peacekeeping, the ones who died in custody and were listed as accidents, the families torn apart because we were not allowed to settle on worlds we discovered first. She began to read. The names took 15 minutes. By the end, half the chamber was weeping. They gave us 6 days to prepare for our surrender. Amara said, they expect us to beg, they expect us to bow, they expect us to be the weak, frightened creatures they have always believed we are. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. They are about to learn how wrong they were. Across human space, the signal went out. In hidden bases and secret stations, men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment received their orders. Ships that had never been registered powered up their engines. Weapons that had never been fired came online. The conquered had given humanity 6 days. Humanity would not need half that long. In the darkness between Earth and Mars, something vast began to move. Running lights flickered on across 2,000 halls, engines that burned with colors the conquered had never seen push ships into formation. The long night was ending and dawn was coming. Admiral Cathry of the VRY hegemony stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance, and smiled at the stars. 700 warships floated behind him. The greatest fleet assembled in a generation. 8 species had contributed their finest vessels to this glorious mission. They called it the Compliance Fleet, and its purpose was simple: remind humanity of its place. Cath had commanded fleets for 60 years. He had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. He had never lost a battle, and he did not expect to lose this one. Humans were clever. Yes, they were persistent, but they were also weak, outnumbered, and hopelessly outmatched. This would not be a battle. It would be a lesson. Admiral, his censor officer, called out, we are approaching the Soul Transit Point. Shall I signal the fleet to prepare for arrival? Yes. Standard intimidation formation. I want every ship visible when we emerge. Let the humans see what is coming for them. The fleet moved into position. 700 vessels arranged themselves in a perfect sphere, weapons facing outward, running lights blazing. It was a formation designed to inspire terror. Every species in the galaxy knew what it meant when a conquered fleet arrived in this configuration. Surrender or die. The transit point activated. Reality bent and twisted. Stars blurred into lines of light. and then with a sound like thunder, 700 ships emerged into the solar system. Kath expected to see panic. He expected distress calls and fleeing transports, and desperate pleas for mercy. He expected the humans to realize finally that their defiance had been foolish. Instead, he saw the line, 2,400 human warships hung in perfect geometric formation between the compliance fleet and Earth. They were arranged in overlapping triangles, each one supporting the others, creating a wall of metal and weapons that stretched across the void. Kefric stared. His sensor officer made a choking sound. "Admiral, our readings must be wrong." "That cannot be correct. What do you see?" "Their ships, their power signatures. They are 3 times stronger than anything in our fleet, and their weapons." The officer looked up with fear in his eyes. "Admiral, those weapons do not match any technology in our database." Kathix gripped the railing of his command platform. This was impossible. The humans were primitives. They had been under conquered observation for 40 years. They could not have built this fleet in secret. They could not have developed weapons the conquered did not recognize. And yet here they were, a communication signal cut through the silence. A human face appeared on the main view screen. She was a woman with short black hair and calm eyes. Her uniform bore the rank insignia of Fleet Commander. "Attention, conquered vessels, this is Fleet Commander Yuki Tanaka of the Terran Defense Force. You have violated the sovereign territory of the Terran Confederation." Her voice was flat, almost bored. "You have 12 minutes to withdraw." Kathik found his voice. "You dare threaten us? You are outnumbered and outmatched. Surrender now and perhaps we will show mercy." Commander Tanaka did not smile. 11 minutes 45 seconds. This is madness. Kathrich slammed his fist against the railing. "You cannot win this fight. We will destroy you." 11 minutes 30 seconds. Kathurix turned to his tactical officer. "All ships advance. Full attack formation. Show these animals what happens to those who defy the conquered." 700 ships surged forward, weapons charged, shields activated. The compliance fleet moved toward the human line like a wave of steel and fire. Commander Tanaka watched them come. Her expression did not change. 9 minutes, she said quietly. Then she closed the channel. The battle began. The first volley came from the human fleet. Beams of light that burned with colors no conquered species had ever seen lanced across the void. They struck the leading Vel cruisers and cut through their shields like they were not there. 3 ships exploded in the first second, 5 more in the next. Kathrix watched in horror as his fleet began to die. "Return fire. All ships return fire." The compliance fleet launched everything it had. Missiles streaked toward the human line. Energy weapons blazed. Thousands of projectiles filled the space between the fleets. The human ships did not move. They did not need to point defense systems activated across the Terran formation. Lasers that tracked faster than thought cut down missiles by the Hun. Shields that shimmered with strange energy absorbed direct hits without flickering. The Conquered's greatest weapons struck the human line and achieved nothing. The human weapons did not miss. Graviton lances tore Dominion battleships apart. Focus plasma bursts melted through Vel armor. Precision strikes targeted engines and weapons, disabling ships rather than destroying them. The humans were not trying to kill everyone. They were Trying to prove a point, they were. Showing mercy, and somehow that made it. Worse, Catholics watched his fleet crumble. Ships that had conquered worlds were reduced to drifting wreckage. Crews that had never known defeat screamed for help that would not come. The formation collapsed into chaos as captains fled in every direction. The battle lasted 9 minutes. When it ended, 412 conquered ships were disabled or destroyed. The rest had surrendered. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. Marines boarded the Eternal Dominance through breached airlocks. They moved through the ship with quiet efficiency, securing compartments and accepting surrenders. They did not abuse their prisoners. They did not gloat. They were professionals doing a job. Catholics was brought to the bridge in restraints. Commander Tanaka's face appeared on the view screen again. Admiral Cathy, she said, your fleet is defeated. Your ships are now property of the Terran Confederation. You and your crews will be held as prisoners until the conclusion of current hostilities. Caths could not speak. His world had collapsed in 9 minutes. One more thing, Tanaka continued, we recorded everything. The council session where you humiliated our ambassador, the battle where we destroyed your fleet. All of it. We are broadcasting these recordings to every inhabited world in the galaxy. She paused. We want them to see what happens when you push humanity too far. We want them to understand that we showed mercy today because we chose to, not because we had to. Her eyes hardened. Tell your masters what you saw. Here, tell them we could have killed every soul in your fleet. Tell them we let you live so you could deliver a message. What message? Cathy whispered. Commander Tanaka leaned forward. We are coming, and we are done being patient. The screen went dark. Cathy stood in the ruined bridge of his flagship and listened to the silence. Somewhere in the distance, a human marine was offering water to captured officers. 9 minutes, that was all it had taken to change the galaxy forever. Orbiter Telvan woke to the sound of screaming, not physical screaming, political screaming. His communication device was flooded with emergency messages from every member of the conquered. He stumbled from his sleeping chamber and activated the main display. The news hit him like a physical blow. The compliance fleet was gone. Not defeated, gone. 400 ships destroyed or captured. 300 more fled into deep space with damaged engines and broken crews. The greatest military force the conquered had assembled in 50 years had been crushed in 9 minutes by a species everyone believed was harmless. Telvan's hands trembled as he dressed. He had served the conquered for 200 years. He had seen wars and rebellions and disasters of every kind, but he had never seen anything like this. How had the humans built such a fleet? How had they developed weapons that could tear through conquered shields like paper? How had they hidden this power for decades? The questions burned in his mind as he rushed to the grand chamber. He found chaos waiting for him. 17 delegations were shouting at each other. The Velry ambassador was demanding immediate revenge. The Dominion representative was calling for a full military mobilization. Others were arguing that the humans must have received help from some outside power, that this could not be possible otherwise. Telvan raised his hands for silence. It took several minutes to restore order. We must remain calm, he said. Yes, we have suffered a setback, but the conquered still commands vast resources. We can rebuild, we can. His communication device chimed. An emergency alert, then another, then a dozen more. The chamber fell silent as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. On 12 mining stations in the outer territories, the core collective had revolted. The insect-like workers of the conquered had used this slave labor. For centuries had seized control of critical facilities, power generation, mineral processing, fuel production. Quarter of the conquered's industrial capacity was now in core hands. The Zendari refugees, those genetic failures that the conquered had dismissed as useless, had revealed their true purpose. For decades they had infiltrated conquered communication networks, they had cockpit files, they had recorded conversations, and now they were broadcasting everything, secret recordings of conquered leaders planning genocides against lesser species, documents showing how the conquered had stolen technology and claimed it as their own, evidence of broken treaties, murdered diplomats, and covered up atrocities. The truth about what the conquered really was poured across every inhabited world went poison, and on 3 conquered home worlds the Nari had simply stopped working. The Nari were the servant class of conquered society. They cleaned the building, they maintained the systems. They did every job that the proud species of the conquered considered beneath them. They had been doing it for so long that everyone had forgotten they were there. Now they remembered. Power grids failed as Nari technicians walked away from their posts. Sanitation systems broke down. Transportation networks collapsed. The great cities of the conquered, those monuments to superiority and power, began to choke on their own waste. Telvin listened to the reports with growing horror. This was not just a military defeat, this was a coordinated collapse. Humanity had not just built a fleet, they had built an alliance. They had spent decades quietly reaching out to every species the conquered had oppressed, and they had waited for exactly this moment. High Arbiter, one of his aides, approached with a pale face. There is an incoming transmission from the humans. Telvin straightened his robes, put it through. The central hologram flickered. Ambassador Elena Vasquez appeared in the middle of the grand chamber. She looked different now. The diplomatic robes were gone. She wore a Terran military uniform with commander's insignia on her shoulders. Her face was calm, but her eyes held something that made Talvin's blood run cold. 40 years ago, Vasquez began. Humanity came to the stars with open hands. We wanted to learn. We wanted to trade. We wanted to find our place in a galaxy full of wonders. She paused. You welcomed us as children. You patted our heads and told us to be grateful for whatever scraps you allowed us. You took our trust and used it as a leash. You laughed at us in your councils. You mocked us in your homes. You made your contempt into law and called it peace. The chamber was absolutely silent. Even the delegations that had been screaming at each other moments ago stood frozen. We tried to earn your respect through patience. We tried to prove ourselves through service. We accepted insults that would have started wars between any other species because we believed, truly believed, that someday you would see us as equals. Vasquez held up a data tablet. It glowed with soft blue light. This contains every treaty, compact, and agreement between Earth and the galactic conquered. 40 years of promises, 40 years of restrictions, 40 years of rules designed to keep Humanity small and weak and dependent on your mercy. She looked directly at Talon. 6 days ago, you told me my services were no longer required. You announced that our colonies would be taken. You sent a fleet to conquer our home world. You did all of this while laughing. Her hand tightened on the tablet. You gave us 6 days. We did not need 6 hours. She dropped the tablet. It shattered on the floor of whatever room she was standing in. The sound echoed through the grand chamber speakers. Consider every agreement between humanity and the conquered to be void. Consider every treaty to be ash. Consider every promise you made and broke to be returned to you a thousandfold. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. You wanted us to be afraid. You wanted us to bow. You wanted us to remember our place. Her smile faded. Now you will remember yours. The transmission ended. Telvin stood in the silence of the grand chamber around him. The representatives of 17 species stared at empty air. Some were angry, some were afraid, some were already calculating how to save themselves from the coming storm. Outside the station's window, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere among them, humanity was waiting. Dawn was breaking across the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. 3 months had passed since the night the treaties burned. The galactic concords still existed, but only in name. 4 species had withdrawn entirely, their governments collapsing under the weight of revealed secrets. The Valkyrie hegemony was fighting a civil war as dozens of subject worlds demanded independence. The Dominion had retreated behind its borders and refused all communication. The sovereignty's economy had crumbled. Without core labor to sustain it, Arbiter Telvon sat in a detention cell on a human station and watched the galaxy he had known die on a viewscreen. The humans had not conquered anyone. That was the strangest part. They had won every battle. They had shattered every fleet sent against them. They could have marched through conquered space and claimed every world they touched. But they had not. Instead, they had built something else. The Terran Compact announced itself to the galaxy on a bright morning on a colony world called New Horizon. 19 species sent representatives, not the old powers of the conquered, but the others, the forgotten ones, the oppressed ones, the species that had spent centuries being used as servants and slaves and subjects. The cores were there, their insect bodies standing tall. For the first time in living memory, the Sundari were there, their genetic differences now celebrated rather than condemned. The Nalari were there, speaking in public chambers instead of cleaning them, and the humans were there not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as founders. Secretary General Elena Vasquez stood at the podium of the first compact assembly. She had been promoted 3 times since that night on Axiom Prime. The young diplomat who had swallowed insults and smiled through humiliation was gone. In her place stood a leader who had learned that some things were worth fighting for. She looked out at the assembled delegates and took a deep breath. Thank you for coming, she began. I know many of you have questions. I know many of you are wondering what humanity wants, what we expect in return. For our help, what price we will demand. For our friendship, she paused. Answer is nothing. We want nothing from you except your partnership, your voice is your trust. A murmur ran through the chamber. Trust was a dangerous word in a galaxy that had forgotten its meaning. I want to tell you something. About humanity, Vasquez continued, we are not heroes, we are not saviors, we are a species that has spent most of our history fighting ourselves. We have committed genocide against our own people, we have enslaved each other, we have destroyed our own world and barely survived to reach the stars. She let that sink in. We know what cruelty looks like, we know what oppression feels like. We know because we have done it, and had it done to us. The conquered was not the first empire to treat other beings as less than equal. It was just the most recent. She stepped away from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage. When the conquered humiliated us, we could have responded with revenge. We could have burned their worlds and enslaved their people and made them suffer as they made us suffer. Many in our own government wanted exactly that. Her voice softened. We chose differently, not because we are weak, not because we are afraid, but because we have learned through centuries of pain that hatred only creates more hatred, conquest only creates more enemies. The only way to truly win is to build something better. She gestured to the delegates around her. The Terran Compact is not an empire, it is a promise. Promise that no species will be mocked for being different, a promise that no people will be enslaved because they are weaker, a promise that strength will be used to protect, not to destroy. She returned to the podium. The old conquered feared what humanity might become. They were right to fear, not because we are conquerors, but because we are proof that their way was never the only way. That cruelty is not inevitable, that the strong can choose to lift up the weak instead of crushing them. She looked directly into the cameras that were broadcasting her words across the galaxy. To those who were part of the conquered, we do not seek your destruction, we do not want your suffering, but we will not accept your rules. We will not bow to your traditions. If you want peace with the compact, you must earn it, not through power, through change. She picked up a document from the podium. This is the Compact Charter. It guarantees equal representation for all member species. It forbids slavery in all its forms. It protects the right of every being to live with dignity and freedom. It is everything the conquered promised and never delivered. She held it up. Today we sign it into law. Today we begin building the galaxy that should have existed all along. The assembly voted. 19 species approved the charter unanimously. For the first time in galactic history, an alliance was formed, not through conquest or fear, but through shared hope. In his detention cell, Telvan watched the ceremony end. He had been high arbiter of the most powerful organization in known space. Now he was a prisoner waiting for judgment. His guards were human, but they treated him well, better, he had to admit, than conquered prisoners had ever been treated. One of them approached his cell, a young woman with dark hair and tired eyes. She carried a cup of water. The ceremony is over, she said. Thought you might want something to drink. Tan took the cup. His old hands trembled. Why? He asked. We would have exterminated your species. We laughed as we planned your destruction. Why show us mercy? The guard was quiet for a moment. Telvan saw something in her eyes. Pain, loss, old wounds that had never fully healed. My grandfather died in the Kepler evacuation, she said. Finally conquered. Soldiers forced him from his home. He had a heart attack on the transport ship. No one helped him. They said it was not their responsibility. Telvan looked away. He had signed the order for that evacuation. He had called it necessary. I wanted revenge, the guard continued. When I heard what happened to your fleet, I celebrated. When I saw your worlds burning, I felt joy. I thought hurting you would make the pain go away. She met his eyes. It did not. Revenge never fills the hole that loss leaves behind. It only makes you empty in a different way. Then why? Talvin asked again. Why spare us? The guard set down the water within his reach. Because we wanted to be better than you, she said simply. And now we are. She walked away without looking back. Talvin sat alone in his cell and drank the water. It was cold and clean and tasted like nothing he had ever experienced in 200 years of power. Outside his window, the stars burned bright. A new dawn had come, and for the first time in his long life, Talvin wondered if he had been wrong about everything.